All right, I think we're all ready to go here. Welcome, first off, to the very first actual streaming session with us. So this is our very first one. I'm pretty sure we're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way, and we're going to be learning a lot as we go here. So just bear with us as we kind of work through everything, and we start to touch on topics and areas that people might be interested in. This is our first of hopefully many weekly streams that we do, covering generally the topic of behaviorism and how to effectively change behaviors. Today, we're really going to talk a little bit about applied behavior analysis, or what people call ABA. Okay, and we'll just touch lightly on that. But I think for people to really understand what ABA is, we're going to have to strip it all down and really talk about where ABA comes from and what the basis for ABA is. Let's start with what ABA is. Okay, so ABA is the application of behavior principles to help change human behaviors. ABA, the basis of it all, is in behaviors, okay? And when we're talking about behaviors, we're talking about anything that anybody does, from screaming to crying to being nice to anything that you conceptualize that we do as people is considered a behavior. When most people talk about behaviors, they're just thinking either like bad behaviors or something like that. In applied behavior analysis, anything that you can learn that can change is considered a behavior. ABA basically is the science of behavior and how behavior changes as a byproduct of its interaction with its environment. So the thing to really understand then about behaviors is that behaviors can go in any number of directions. It can increase, it could decrease, it could remain steady, or it can go away completely. So when we talk about these behaviors that go up, that go down, then we have to understand like, oh, well, what happens? Like, what is it that results in these behaviors changing over time? And that then what ABA seeks to do is control for these factors, these environmental factors that influence our behaviors, so that then we can direct the behaviors in the direction that we want it to go. Now, the funny thing about ABA is you can know absolutely nothing about ABA and be really good about using behavior principles to help people. So, and on the other side of it, you can know all the terminology, you can understand all the principles, you can take tests, you can pass tests, and you still might not know how to effectively work and change people's lives. We're here to kind of talk about, well, what is it then that causes these behaviors to change over time, and what are the environmental conditions that affect that behavior change? So when we're talking about behaviors and how they change, then the thing to understand is that none of us live in a vacuum, meaning like, oh, we can't keep the individual out of the environment, and we can only look at the individual and only look at their behaviors. Why? Because we change and adapt based on the environments that we're in. And that it's the interaction between the individual and the environmental circumstances that produces the behavior change. And so that's why you can have two different kids grow up in the same household, and they, with the exact same discipline system, with the exact same reinforcement system, with the same exact parenting, and the two kids can turn out vastly different from each other because they start off different. When they're born, the kids already have certain strengths and weaknesses to them that are unique to them, and they have distinct types of personality and distinct types of disposition that's specific to them. And so when you use one method of doing something, okay, it's going to work with one child and not work with the other. Why? Because their motivations are different. The things that they care about are different. The things that will make behavior change in one child will not work on the other child. So some of us are born more stubborn than others, right? Some of us are born sandstone and some of us are born granite, and these are different types of rocks. One type of rock you can get in your hand and just you can use strength and you can crumble it. The other one, you can smash it with your hand and you're going to hurt your hand. It's not going to affect the granite at all, And so that's what you want to understand. It's like, oh, we're all born of different materials. We're all born with different dispositions, and that the environment produces changes, but based on the interaction between that environment and the material that you're working with. So when you place sandstone into an environment in which granite is, that sandstone is likely to get shaped really easily and likely to be destroyed. Whereas you put that granite in an environment that's made for sandstone, that granite's not going to change for a long period of time, if ever. The other thing that kind of sets us apart from a lot of the other psychological fields is that when we talk about behaviors and behavior principles, it's not based off of one person or several people thinking about like, oh, this is what I think happens. Everything in applied behavior analysis is about what actually happens. And it's studying organisms, it's studying people, and it's deriving principles of how people learn, how people adapt, how people grow. And it's using those principles in real life situations to really make meaningful changes. The thing is, along with that, all that research and all that, those behavior principles, is this idea that it's never about intent, okay? It's not what we intend to do that we're looking at. It's always the results of what we do, okay? So what that means is that in ABA, when we take a look at any kind of intervention or anything that we do to help produce behavior change, what we call it in terms of reinforcement or punishment has nothing to do with whether or not we want something to happen. It always is tied to, well, what actually happens to the behavior? Okay? So if a behavior increases as a result of our intervention or the things that we do, it's called reinforcement. And if a behavior goes away or decreases as a result of what we do, it's called punishment. And it doesn't matter if we wanted the behavior to go up and it went down. If it went down, it's punishment. If it went up, it's reinforcement. The intent of it doesn't matter. Let's say that you have a child that rips up their math because they don't want to do their math, okay? So somebody's intent might be like, oh, I want to get rid of the ripping behavior. I don't like them to rip up their worksheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this child timeout, So every time they rip up their math, I'm going to put them in timeout, okay? And then, so what happens functionally is that, oh, for the child, I don't want to do this math. Guess what happens? You put me in timeout, which means I don't have to do the math. So what am I going to do in the future? Okay, so from the person working with them, oh, my idea is to, and my intent is for this behavior to go down or to get rid of this behavior. And this is the intervention that I'm using, right? In reality, then what's happening is that, oh, that behavior is actually getting reinforced. Why? Because the child did not want to do the homework. And by setting them aside, now, yay, I got what I want. I didn't get to do my homework. So that behavior is going to increase. Whenever it increases, it doesn't matter what the intent of what you did was, then because that behavior increased, it's reinforcement. That leads us to another foundation of applied behavior analysis, which is its reliance on data, okay? And data is us recording actually things that actually happen, you know? So like, oh, whenever we work with a child, then we record all of their responses, how they're responding, so that when we say something's improved, we can demonstrate that it's actually improved, that it's not just based on, and when reinforcement occurs, we can demonstratively show that, oh, these behaviors have actually increased as a byproduct of the interventions that I used. And on the other side of it, that these other types of behaviors have decreased, have been gone as a result of the things that we've done, as opposed to, oh, you know what? I work with this kid and I really wanted these things to improve, but did they actually improve? Who knows? Here's the thing though, as human beings, we rely on our perceptions, like, oh, how we perceive things to make a lot of decisions, okay? And what you really realize is that all of our perceptions, or most of them, are wrong. The things that we believe, a lot of times they're inaccurate, okay? And what that means is that, oh, when we're basing all of our decisions, especially when we're working and helping kids or teaching skills and things like that, if we're operating off of the wrong things, it's going to adversely affect the teaching and adversely affect how well and how quickly this child's going to learn in any given situation. Okay? So that's why for us, we have to rely on data, because the data tells us whether we're going in the right direction or not. So all of what we do is relying on data to help guide what we're going to do with any particular situation, because then we want to actually know, are the things that we're actually doing effective or are they not? Does it actually help or is it not helping at all? Because when you operate just on pure belief, sometimes you miss all the evidence that, oh, what you're doing is actually not working, because you want things to happen with somebody. All of your beliefs and all of that stuff make it so that you see things sometimes that aren't there. You add other things into the situation that make it so that, oh, the situation is not clear and it's not actually what's happening. So everything that you'll hopefully learn from me is that everything should have a purpose behind it. You know, everything that you do should have a purpose behind it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time to do. Why I say that is that a lot of us as people that work with other people and work with kids and trying to change their behaviors, a lot of times we do things because that's how somebody taught us how to do things. Okay, and we copy those things, but we copy those things without really understanding, well, why does that thing work? How does it work? What are the mechanisms behind it actually working? And what happens is that we replicate what we have experienced and we copy it and we do it without really understanding the reasons behind it. And a lot of times, over time, it starts to lose its function because it no longer has the rationale behind it. And then you start wasting your time doing things that are just no longer effective. I usually like to tell a story about kind of like demonstrating that in actual practice. Okay. Now, I don't know how well this is going to translate because it's much more geared for American audiences. But this is a story I think it highlights this type of problem. Okay, so we have a mom, okay, and she's used to cooking a big prime rib roast. Okay, so that's a big piece of meat that she likes to cook. So she buys it from the market, she cuts it in half, she seasons it, and she cooks it. Okay. Now, if you go and ask the mom, like, oh, you know what? Like, well, is there a reason you cut it in half before you season it? Does it make it taste better? Like, what is it about this? You know, does it make the meat more tender? What is it? Well, you know, when the mom answers, like, oh, you know what? I don't know. This is the same recipe that I got from my mom. I'm just copying what my mom did. right? So you go to her mom and you ask like, oh, so, you know, is there a reason you cut the pot roast? And the mom would tell you like, oh, you know what? Back in my day, my ovens were only so small that one big piece of rib roast couldn't fit into the oven. So I needed to cut it in half in order to cook it. Okay. So here we have things that are passed down from one person to another. And the reason for doing stuff gets lost. Okay. So then it ends up being a waste of time for that person even to cut it in half because it doesn't have any other reason attached to it other than, hey, I didn't have an oven that was big enough to accommodate this large size of meat. So now this is one of the big messages to understand, and hopefully it's parents and students and things that are watching this podcast, but it's really understanding that what we do and how we kind of go about things makes a big difference in the results that we're looking at, you know? So when you're taking a look at like, oh, I've been trying to change somebody's behaviors for a long time, and I rely on a specific way of doing it, and the behaviors are still there, what you're doing is not working, okay? Oh, just because your parents did things to you and you're doing it to your kids, but the kids' behaviors are remaining the same, what that tells you is that what you're doing is not effective. Okay? So then the job here is to change what you're doing so that it actually produces the behavior changes that you're looking for. A common mistake that parents make is when they ascribe things to their kids that aren't in their kids, you know, like they see their kids in a way that, oh, their kids aren't that way, you know, and it's easy for us to like, oh, you know what, I don't like things, so my child shouldn't like those things. And then we use those things that we think we like and we think our kids like, and we try to do those things when those things are not working at the child's level, because your child is different from you, and you have to realize that, and you have to work at the child's level and at the individual level. So then we should then talk about, well, what is going to actually then be meaningful in terms of changing behaviors, okay? And the key to always changing a behavior is motivation, okay? So what that means is that we need to be motivated to do things, you know, like, oh, like anxiety, right? All of us have some level of anxiety, okay? The thing is that there's a healthy amount of anxiety and there's an unhealthy amount of anxiety. Right? A healthy amount is just enough to get you motivated to do the things you need to do. An unhealthy amount is when you worry so much about something that you don't actually go about doing because you're too worried about it, and it stops you from doing anything. Okay, so however, if we have no anxiety, well, we're not motivated to do anything. Okay, so anxiety has to, like, oh, we have to work in that small narrow gap, and that's the same thing when it comes to motivating anybody to do anything, is that we have to find that area for that individual in order for effective behavior change to occur. So the key is to access this motivation, okay? And when you can access motivation, that's when you get actual behavior change. Okay? Now, the thing is that most parents think that if their child understands something, it will cause the behavior change. Okay, and this is one of the biggest misunderstandings about it, is that behavior can change without us understanding it at all. right? And that when we're talking about understanding, the child doesn't have to understand anything for their behaviors to change. But most parents believe that if my child just understands it, they'll change their behaviors. As a person, I can understand, hey, exercise is good for me. I can understand like, oh, eating healthier is good for me. I can understand all that stuff. But does it actually change my lifestyle? Does it actually change my eating habits? Does it change my exercise regimen? Okay. And what you'll find when you look at your own life is that no, you understanding things doesn't change anything. Okay. However, when certain environmental conditions occur that access your motivation, okay, oh my gosh, you got a diagnosis of diabetes. All right, now I got to change something about my life, okay? Oh, I really like this girl, okay? Or I like this guy. All right, I got to get fit and I got to get good looking, you know, to act like there's other things that access the motivation. There are things that happen environmentally that cause us to be motivated to do stuff. Us knowing about stuff doesn't actually produce behavior change. The thing is that, oh, you know, like I can remember when I was a young child, you know, and I have a sister, and I used to tease my sister, right? Like all good siblings should do, they tease their siblings, right? And so the thing is, my parents did not like that at all, you know? So they would have some punishment or some sort of discipline for us if we did that. Okay? Now, the thing is that there's going to be times when it's like, you know what? It's more fun to tease them and suffer the consequences than it is that the punishment or the discipline is, well, you know what? I you know, it's just more enjoyable. See, like, oh, me getting my sibling at this time, that's just a lot more enjoyable. So that's the thing is like, oh, when we take a look at any situation, we have to look at the motivation behind that. And in order for behavior change to actually occur, in my instance, that means that that punishment needs to be severe enough that it overrides my enjoyment of teasing my sibling. So I think that pretty much wraps up our first stream. I really appreciate everybody that cared to sign in and hear us out. Since this is our first one, hey, we made a lot of mistakes, you know, and so we're going to learn from that. Hopefully you'll find that we get better and better as we kind of go through this. But we're very appreciative of any comments that you have, any suggestions in terms of the format, how we do things. There's definitely things that I recognize that, oh, I did. Like if you can catch areas where I lose my train of thought, for sure I lost my train of thought somewhere in there, you know, and I scrambled to find it. And sometimes I just didn't find it, you know. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of things that we'll be working through here. And we appreciate your patience as we kind of work through those. And hopefully you can join us the next time as we kind of continue on with these topics. If you like us, please hit the like button and by all means subscribe. We'll see everybody next time.